Then there's California, a podcast featuring members of the California State Senate Democratic Caucus in conversation about their lives, their legislative priorities, policies, and other related issues that help make California exceptional. From the state capitol in Sacramento, I'm Brian Green. Back at the end of October, the Twitterverse exploded with news and plenty of commentary about Governor Gavin Newsom's decision to abruptly cancel his much-talked-about plan to lead a state delegation to a global summit on climate change. The governor's reason for doing so? His children had begged him to stay home for Halloween and go trick-or-treating with them. So he made the difficult but nevertheless personally important decision to skip the conference in Europe and remain in California with his kids. Likely there is no parent out there who doesn't identify with the challenge and complication of balancing work priorities and family commitments, and that life-work balance can get especially complicated for parents who work in high-profile, high-pressure jobs, often working away from home for days at a time. A work-life balance situation familiar not only to the governor of California, but also to his colleagues in the California State Legislature, who travel, sometimes long distances across the state, to and from the state capitol every week during the 9-month legislative session. They spend their weekends committed to legislative activities, and they're highly attuned to trying to keep an equilibrium between their legislative commitments and the connection to their kids, sometimes very young kids. On this edition of Then There's California, we'll talk to 3 of our California State Senator parents, elected officials who are well-versed in, if not ever getting fully comfortable with, the delicate art of prioritizing work commitments and family time. They don't consider themselves any more special than any other active, working, traveling parents across the state. And in fact, because they are moms and dads and treasure their children and covet the memories created and the precious time spent with them, they are especially laser-focused in their jobs on balancing their own policy priorities to address statewide inequities in family leave, in child care availability and affordability, and making it easier for their fellow moms and dads in California to prioritize their families. So let's talk to 3 of our California State Senator parents. Monique Limón is a freshman state senator from Santa Barbara, representing California's 19th Senate District on the South Coast. She's chair of the Senate Committee on Banking and Financial Institutions, and Senator Limón and her husband Michael are parents to a 1-year-old daughter, Gianna. Senator Limón, thanks for being with us again on Then There's California.
Thank you. Great to be on.
Senator Josh Newman joins us for the first time. He's from Fullerton, representing Orange County's 29th Senate District. Senator Newman and his wife Darcy have a 5-year-old daughter, Cecily, who is in kindergarten. Senator Newman, welcome to Then There's California.
And thank you, Brian. Nice to be here.
And way up to California's north coast, we find State Senator Mike McGuire from Healdsburg. He is the Assistant Majority Leader in the State Senate, and he and his wife Erica are the proud parents of a 9-month-old son named Connor. This is also Senator McGuire's first time joining us on this podcast. Senator McGuire, welcome.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Well, my friends, great to have you all here on this podcast. Let's start off by hearing about your parenting experiences and about life with your daughters and son. First, let's start off with you, Senator Limón. Tell us all about the experience of being a mom and all about your 1-year-old baby girl, Gianna.
Well, I will say I'm going to give you a very short version of my experience because I think sometimes the burden, especially in the earlier years and that newborn and infant status, is different for women and men. And when I reflect about my experience, I reflect on the fact that I'm also only the second woman in history in the state of California to be a senator who has an infant, right? We've seen many parents who have school-age kids, but I'm only the second one to have a child while in office as a woman. And so I think that it's a unique experience. It's a unique experience. The last senator was Martha Scutia, and that was nearly 2 decades ago. And so I think that there's a lot of reflections about what that means to the institutions when there hasn't been a whole lot of women to give birth, to have newborns, and how that is also different from some of our really supportive, amazing, and active and very involved fathers who are in the Senate as well. You know, when I think of my takeaways in year one, I certainly can relate to the challenges of many of how do you balance, you know, your time, your child. There's just, I mean, the list kind of goes on, including lactation and nursing and all of those things. Do you bring your child with you to Sacramento? Does your child stay? All of those things, I think, were elements that many, many parents have to deal with. But we also had the one element of having a child during COVID and trying to understand what were the right things to do or not to do as it related to working, parenting, and also being very thoughtful about COVID and the health implications for the state, for ourselves, for our children. And I think that complicated it a bit, but I feel like, here I am a year into this and we somehow made it we made it work. And I say we because it was 100% my husband, myself, and my family, my parents especially, who have just been unbelievably supportive. And I was able and very fortunate and blessed to be able to count on a support system to help me continue to be successful as a state representative. And I think that is what it takes, right? It takes people coming together and people trying to understand what are the needs, how do you solve for some of the needs, but also how do you stay focused on the work that we're elected to do.
Senator Limón, I'm curious, have you seen Gianna's personality blossom or come to life in the past year? From that newborn, needy little being in your arms whose existence is, simply sleeping, nursing, crying, sleeping again, to actually a 1-year-old little girl growing into her own little self, developing as an individual. Are you seeing that in Gianna?
Oh, I am absolutely seeing that in Gianna. I think, yes. I mean, just in a few months, right? I think that you also see, what you're exposing them to, right? So Gianna traveled, not the first month, but later on traveled with me to Sacramento. And so she's become actually a pretty decent traveler. And I hope I don't jinx myself of understanding, what it means to go on a plane and when we get there and the whole thing. And so I've seen her adapt to things, but I've also seen her develop her personality from a little one who does the most basic things to a little one who knows what she likes and she lets it known what she likes and dislikes and when she likes things to happen. So we are watching that and navigating that. And she's also quite more mobile now, which is a different stage for sure than when she was just in our arms or laying somewhere. Now she's just she's crawling, not walking yet, but all over the place.
Senator McGuire, tell us all about being a dad to your 9-month-old son, Connor, also known informally and affectionately as Corn Dog, which I love. So tell us about your son.
Yeah, first and foremost, my mom says, where the hell did Corn Dog come from? And look, I don't know how that started, but literally when we were still in the hospital, I started calling him Corn Dog, and it stuck. And I got to tell you, and I'm going to get blubbery talking about him, I feel so incredibly grateful. Erica and I, we really struggled getting pregnant. We didn't think that we were going to be able to have a child naturally. We had even talked about the potential of adoption. And when we found out that Erica was pregnant, we were over the moon. It was probably the best day in our lives. And now that Connor is here, it's been simply an amazing experience. And he's a goofball. Every time he poops, he laughs, which is the best damn thing in the world. He is a food hound. You put food in front of him, he'll eat it. He has an amazing sense of humor at 9 months old. I think he's going to be an outgoing kid, and we just feel so grateful. And it's just my mom and Erica's mom, and the grandmas are also thrilled beyond belief to be able to have a grandson, and we couldn't be more excited. And the kid loves the dog. So we have Gertrude the pug, and I will tell you, Brian, Gertrude is still pissed that there is a kid in the house. For the first 6 weeks, the damn dog didn't eat because she was under protest. Now she tolerates him, but he absolutely loves her. So every morning when he gets up, I go in, I get him up, and I put the dog into his crib, and he goes crazy and screams like a hyena when Gertrude is with him, and it's just the best thing to see.
That's wonderful. And Senator Newman, tell us about being a dad and all about your 5-year-old daughter, Cecily. And I know you are a few years ahead in the parenting experience than either Senator Limón or Senator McGuire, but share with us the experience of life with a kindergartner.
So I'm not sure I'm ahead so much. I'm a little bit further ahead on the roller coaster. I have a thoroughly charming 5-year-old little person, and it's been just wonderful to watch her from about age 3 on kind of take on the characteristics of the person she will someday be, and that person is going to be, by all indications, pretty interesting, and that includes some level of incredibly stubborn, very gregarious, but very inquisitive as well. So having a 5-year-old during the pandemic, 4-year-old now, 5-year-old, really interesting because it's forced us to kind of see the world through her eyes. And also nice to have recently gotten Cecily vaccinated, so we're that much closer to a return to normal. All I had to do was promise her an ice cream, a hot dog, and a stuffed mermaid, and she was good to go.
Oh, wow. You are the father of the year. That's great.
But she's in kindergarten, as you mentioned, and so she's been in daycare since my wife and I both work. My wife probably has a more challenging job than I do. So my little kid's been in daycare, childcare, since she was 3 months old, since the end of my wife's very short maternity leave. In fact, my wife's company only gave her 2 months.
Wow.
And so for my daughter's month 3, and at the time I was running for office, I carried a little kid around with me in a basket to all manner of meetings and appearances. And it was probably eye-opening in a way that hopefully is helpful to me as a legislator. But right now, my kid's back in school. That's encouraging. As I mentioned, we're just in Arizona for a family wedding. And my little kid in the last year has been a flower girl 3 times and is convinced that if there's a wedding anywhere within 30 miles, she's supposed to be the flower girl.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I said, when can we leave? When do you want to leave? And she said, never.
I love this. Senators, talk about your families that you come from, your family history, and your spouses. Where are you in the birth order of your family? Do you have siblings? Is your son or daughter the first grandchild of the family? First with you, Senator McGuire.
So Connor is not the only grandkid, but I have to say he's the favorite. So in all seriousness, so Connor has Victoria. Victoria is Erica's brother's daughter, and she loves on Connor all the time, and they're really close, and we feel very grateful for that. He has an older cousin, Jorge, our nephew, and he's the oldest grandson or grandkid. He's 22 and going on 40. Erica is the youngest in her family. She has an older sister, an older brother, and then herself. And I'm an only child. My mom, I'm really tight with my mom. My mom and dad divorced when I was really young. It was a pretty bad divorce, and my grandma helped raise me. And having my grandma so close to me in my life, my grandma took my mom in after the divorce and really helped get us back on our feet. And my grandma helped raise me when my mom worked. My mom was a working single mom. She and I struggled growing up financially, and if it wasn't for my grandma, we wouldn't have made it. And having my grandma so close to me, my mom and I always talked, we want her close to Connor.
That's really sweet. Senator Newman.
So for me, I'm from a family of 2 kids. I'm the younger of 2. I have an older sister who's about 16 months older than I am, and we grow up very close. And so my daughter is an only child, but she's not the first grandchild by any means. I'm an old dad. So my sister has 3 kids that are all now, I think, just graduating. The last one's just graduated from college. So they've got cousins. My daughter's got cousins that are old people, but they dote on her, and they couldn't be more tickled to be around her. Why don't you go ahead, Monique?
And I would say, for me, I am the eldest of 2 siblings, but Gianna is not the first grandchild. Gianna is the 3rd grandchild, and there is a 9-year difference between the next in line. And so I think it's been really wonderful to kind of see just what she has brought into our family dynamic on my side. And it's just fun. I think little ones bring in an energy to the family, but also require an energy. And so it's really, lots of fun. And I think she is the only child. She is our first and only. And so we're making sure to expose her. She's just started daycare. Finally, I got her into daycare after months and months of wait lists. But I'm watching that also create her social surrounding and how she's developing in personality.
Reflect on the way that you were parented by your parents. Are there memories and parenting styles that you experienced growing up that you hope to replicate and are replicating in raising your child? Or are there any past family parenting styles and experiences that you're perhaps, running away from? Well, that was the way I was raised, but I don't want to do that again to my kid. In the way that you parent your own child. Senator Limón.
Well, I would say that, both happen. I think that there's really values that I think of, in terms of spending time together with the family. When possible, we tried to break bread together with her grandparents and her godparents and that. So I think that those are some of the traditions that I would like to keep alive and with her and have her experience. And I think that some of the things that are different, and I kind of chuckle, is just watching the care and how the science is different now on some of the elements, right? In terms of, what do you give someone with a little cold? What did you do then that you do now? And so that's really fun, I think, as a mother to be able to share with my mother. And it's created a kind of a new bond between my mother and myself in terms of comparing stories or comparing information or knowledge. And there's still some things that were amazing 5 decades ago to do for little ones that are still good now, right?
Delightful.
Yeah. So, and I'll give you an example of something that my mom just thinks is like the best thing in the world, which is there is something that's kind of like a baby formula Keurig. And so it is like perfect. You put the baby formula in, like the water comes out at the perfect, warm temperature, and it's like super quick. And my mother is like, this is amazing. Like, we did not have this decades ago. Like, you had to boil the water, let it cool, and doing all of that in the middle of a night feeding was really hard. So there's things like that we are just comparing notes about. And again, they don't speak, I think, all to just family traditions and values, but they speak to just these experiences that we're getting to share together, but also reflecting on the past and what it was like to be a mother decades ago versus a mother now.
And Senator Newman, any reflections there on the past, present with parenting and your own family?
So for me, I have this very hazy memory. It's hard to remember our 3, 4, 5-year-old selves. But my parents were kind of classic, I think, kind of 1970s parents. My dad was a physician, right? So he worked, he got home every day at give or take the exact same minute. And we had dinner. I mean, that's sort of the prevailing feature of my childhood was family dinner every night. And we try to do that in my family as well. But one of the things that I find especially kind of perplexing at this moment, right, with my kid is 5. As I mentioned, she can be kind of defiant sometimes. Parenting styles were a little bit different back in 1968, 71. And if you forego the option of physical discipline, it makes for a really interesting conversation with a 5-year-old because she sort of figured out at this point she wins every time. But, it is funny to reflect. My dad passed away when I was about 27. And so I find myself thinking fondly of him. And whenever my kid does something, genetics is an interesting thing that so clearly comes from that tree, right? Descended from my dad to me to her. It makes me think very fondly of my dad.
Senator McGuire, what about you?
So look, my grandma was a hard-nosed rancher. My grandma ran our family's prune ranch and transitioned it to wine grapes. And I will tell you, you did not want to mess with her. And I never learned that lesson. She carried a 2x4. And she instilled in me 3 things that stick with me to this day. You got to work hard, and you have to be the hardest working person in the room to be able to get ahead in life. You got to surround yourself with smart people. And you're never going to get anywhere in life by yourself. It's a team sport, and you got to surround yourself with folks who are going to help you get to where you can go. And 3, you can't take no for an answer on the issues that you believe in and the people you work for. And that is so true today, and that's what I want to be able to instill in Corn Dog. Work hard, you got to work together, and you can't take no for an answer. And I think that's what we need right now. And that's something that Erica and I have talked about significantly as we were pregnant, and now with Connor here, is what can we carry over from our childhood? And that's really a philosophy that I think is critically important and that my grandma instilled in me, instilled in my mom, and I feel grateful for that, and that's really helped me in some of the most challenging times.
So I wanted to get your reaction to the scenario I opened the podcast with about Governor Newsom on the eve of the COP26 climate conference in Scotland at the end of October, making the sudden decision to not go abroad to the conference, to stay at home here in California and spend time with his family. His kids wanted him to be home and go trick-or-treating with them. So do you sympathize or identify with that challenge and choice that the governor made and the dilemma that you and so many other parents face out there of constantly having to balance the priority of work attention and family commitment and, during the legislative session, having to be gone from home up to 4 days of the week? So tell me about some of your parenting logistics and your empathy, if that's what it is, for the governor and his parenting situation. Senator McGuire, starting with you.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about much to do about nothing. But look, just being honest about it, the governor should have said it in the beginning that he wants to spend some time with his kids, because everyone's going to understand that. Secondly is we should respect it. Dad duty comes first. And Governor Newsom spent a lot of time on the road, and he owes it to his family, his kids, to be there for him. And I gain incredible respect for him putting his family first. And that's what we should want in our leaders, focusing on family, focusing on their kids, to have some balance in their life. And Governor Newsom is constantly working 24/7, and I'm grateful that he put his kids first and made the decision to be able to stay home versus go abroad to Glasgow.
And obviously you empathize on this because you deal with this kind of thing. You can't fly home easily. You have to drive. You have a huge district over there on the North Coast. You have to be in Sacramento 4 days a week. How do you keep the home fires burning as a parent from so far away? How do you and Erica balance that, especially during session time, with you away from home and everything going on the coast?
Yeah, so Erica and I made a deal when So we talked a lot about, prior to me running for Senate, on how we wanted to be able to work our marriage, just being blunt about it. My family hasn't always been the best when it comes to marriage. My family are all police officers. There's been a high divorce rate in my family. And I knew that I wanted to be able to have a family unit. And I've thought like this since I was a kid. So since I started in the Senate, Erica has literally come over every Wednesday, so we only spend 2 nights apart. So I'm in SAC 7 months a year, Monday through Thursday, and I can't tell you how grateful I am, Brian, that she's made that decision, and it's not easy. Every week she'd come over, she'd leave. She's an elementary school principal. She'd leave school a little early with the consent of the district, do conference calls on the road. We would have dinner together, be together on Wednesday night, then I'd come home on Thursday. With Connor, now here, that's going to be a little more difficult. And so I think we're going to need to flip that and me head home on Wednesdays. And that's something that we are talking about even as we speak. But it's about everyone has to compromise. I would be lying to you if I didn't say that the schedule is incredibly busy. But what we always have to focus on, and it's so easy to ignore it, is making time. We got to make time for the corn dog. We got to make time for us, because I want this to work. And it is 110% teamwork between Erica and I. And I know a lot of people talk about it, but it's true. Erica and I have been together for 16 years. In the first 48 hours that we said that we were going to be together, we told each other almost everything that sticks to this day. We knew that this was going to end up in marriage. I don't know how, but we just knew. And when we're open and honest with each other in the beginning, it's benefited us now going on almost 2 decades. And just feel really, really grateful for it. And it's 100% partnership. And that's how we're going to focus on it here in the months to come.
Senator Newman, what do you think about that?
So I've got a ton of sympathy for the governor, and so he may have some mild regrets about how he kind of operationalized that. But when you consider what the governor of California tends to on any given day, and then add to that the pandemic, the recall, and all of the associated burdens from there, it makes total sense to me that he had that moment of insight where, his kids basically staged an intervention and he decided, you're right. This is important. I'm going to stay home. We've all been there. For my own part, as far as keeping the fires burning, one of the really interesting things for me in sort of reflecting on changes in parenting, and we're all tired of Zoom, after the pandemic's second year. But one of the wonderful things about being a dad away from home these days is you can use FaceTime or Zoom, and you can be right there at home or seemingly close enough, sort of a facsimile of that. And so on any given night when I'm up in Sacramento, I'll get done at 6:30 or so. I'll FaceTime home. My wife will put me on FaceTime, and she'll put the phone up on the bathroom counter while our little kid takes a bath. And I'll be on FaceTime sometimes for an hour and a half until Cecily goes to sleep. And it's nice, and it's kind of funny when I see my kid's reaction. She doesn't make a big distinction between dad on the phone and dad in person, which in some ways is a good thing, in some ways is a weird thing.
Right.
But it has allowed me to feel more present and certainly to share some really nice moments.
And Senator Limón, obviously, I'm sure you empathize, but share some of your perspectives on this.
Well, absolutely. I can relate to the governor in the sense of we've all had those moments where, you just have to make a decision, and sometimes that decision is driven by gut and just where you feel you need to prioritize your time and energy. And I think that, there's two things about what happened, I think, with the governor that are really important to reflect on. One, it's a situation that, again, millions of parents go through. But two, we still haven't normalized it. We still haven't normalized for elected executives kind of having this moment where you prioritize family. So I was slightly disappointed with some of the feedback that was not supportive of the decision that he made. And certainly as someone I've been an environmental champion on policy issues, it doesn't mean that it changes the priority and the necessity to think about climate action and climate change, right? Because these were the comparisons that were being drawn. It doesn't stop it. Attending an international conference isn't the only way to be an active member who's addressing climate policy and climate change. And I think that that's the reality. We all know that. So I think there was a little bit of disappointment on my part to see that even in 2021, as a country, as a state, we haven't completely normalized prioritizing family for high executives. And so I think those feelings that I think were my reflection, and I hope that time will change some of that. But I think that it's not just time. I think it's also for men and women who are in these high roles having public conversations about the need to balance, right? The need to be able to do both, and also to provide evidence to the people that we represent that you can do both, and you can do both without missing out on moving important agendas forward. So I think there's still some work that's needed, and I can absolutely relate to Josh and FaceTime. I am a mother who probably is away from my daughter more than the average mother, but even so, I managed to figure out a way to always see her, if not bringing her up with me, and I've had to, on occasion, do the FaceTime bedtime routine. So I can completely relate to what that means. And I don't know what it'll feel like in 5 years. I think Josh, is kind of alluding to it becomes normal, but certainly I've done it now in her first year of life.
Monique, in 5 years, you'll put on a headset and you'll wear these haptic gloves. You'll be able to hug her. You'll never go home again.
Well, listen, Senator Limón, you make me realize, and I say this with all humility and respect, the blessing of you being a legislator, a senator here in 2021. It's possible 20 or 30 years ago in this scenario, you would not have had the agency as a woman, an elected official, to make these decisions on your behalf, to be able to have a child and be an elected official, to take time off, to do things on your own terms. It's possible you wouldn't have been able to run. You would have had scorn from the community or the culture out there. What is she doing? She's ignoring her children. So it's really a blessing that the world has evolved, for the most part, to where this is more the norm, even at the Capitol.
I think you're right. I think one of the changes that I've seen, I've seen just a change in the last 5 years. The number of parents, both women and men, in the legislature who have school-age kids has really increased. It's still not the great majority, but it's increased significantly, where I see it driving policy conversations both internally for the legislature, but also externally in terms of what we're doing for Californians. If you look at some of the paid family leave bills that have gone through, some of the accommodations, I mean, we just aligned a few years ago some policies that were given at the federal level to what we're doing at the state level. You are listening to a national conversation around paid family leave, around child care issues. Like, these are all issues that have mattered to Californians, but also now I think with more legislators who are parents of school-age kids and who are living in the moment some of these challenges that so many working parents have to face, it's a refresher and it's really fresh in our perspective and our passion for kind of the work that we're doing around some of these issues. So certainly I am grateful for where I'm at. I'm grateful for the support that I have, both from my colleagues in the legislature, but also my family support system, and for the district that recognizes that they want moms in office as well, and that moms bring something to the table. And so I think that that's important. But again, all of these things don't mean it makes my job easier. It just means that things are slowly changing, but we still have quite a bit of work to do.
Well, speaking of slowly changing, this pandemic in particular has also brought into sharp focus many disparities facing families, the lack of parental leave, child care. We are all fortunate that we have access to those when we need them here at the Capitol, that many in California do not. And the U.S. is falling so far behind in making parental and maternity leave and maternal health care available, child care available to working families and families in general, especially compared to, in particular, the rest of the countries across the globe. What's your reaction further to these challenges that here we are, the most developed nation in the world, and we're so far behind? Senator Newman.
So for us, I mean, that to me, the most striking feature of being a dad of a young kid, and as to your point, the pandemic emphasized it, was just how stunningly expensive childcare is to working families. So when you consider what you pay in post-tax earnings to allow for your child to be in a good, nurturing, safe place for 8 hours a day, I mean, quite often that's more than the wages of one of the two wage earners in a family, and it makes it really onerous, makes it overwhelming. And the net of that during the pandemic was to have kind of a female recession. A disproportionate number of women had to stay at home, particularly when schools were closed, and will wind up even further behind in sort of, their wage earning and sort of gender equality terms than they already are. And that's not okay.
Senator McGuire, what do you have to say?
Here's my bottom line. As challenging as it may be for Erica and I to be able to balance, we are so grateful to be able to have Connor in our lives. We are filled with love and gratitude because, Erica and I didn't think that we were ever going to be here and be parents, which it makes it even more rewarding. But you take a look at the challenges we have compared to millions across this state and throughout the country who are struggling to put food on their table, to be able to make ends meet. We have it pretty damn good. And that's why I think it is so critical that the legislature focuses on delivering for kids who are in greatest need and making sure that we have the resources for parents to be able to provide for their kids. That's why we're so focused on building the wage in this state, delivering good jobs for folks in every corner of California, investing in strong public schools, and of course, focusing on child care. And, since the pandemic, Sonoma County has lost 52% of all child care slots. And we see similar numbers in all 58 counties throughout the state of California. Child care and access to affordable child care is incredibly challenging at the moment. And that's why I really think it's so important that California is focusing on expanding state-subsidized child care slots. We've gone from 200,000 state-subsidized child care slots prior to the pandemic. We're now funding up to 400,000 total state-subsidized child care slots, doubling the number of state-subsidized child care slots in the next 24 months. And we really have to focus on that as a legislature. Working families, especially working moms, shouldn't have to choose between raising their kid and going to work if they so choose. And we have to make that part of this society. And we also have to move forward with transitional kindergarten and expand preschool slots. And that's why it's so important that we focus on that as a state. And candidly, that's where President Biden has been in his Build Back Better bill, focusing on expanding preschool. And why one party would be against expanding preschool and early childhood education is beyond me. But we know when we invest in early childhood education, that child will benefit for their entire life.
Senator Limón.
Oh, I absolutely agree with you. And I think it's not okay. And we've realized, so there's things that we've always known, but the pandemic really highlighted them in terms of the sheer recession that's happening and how many women and mothers have had to leave the workforce and how we're going to get them back. And I think it highlights what we have known for a very long time, that there has been a very active role for women who have to be both the professional but also are oftentimes responsible for the care of child ones in the family. And even if it's split, it's sometimes, some women take the lead and so forth. And so I think that that's all absolutely very true. And so it's important that we're having these discussions, not just in California. And I think we didn't have to wait for this infrastructure bill or the Biden administration plan to have these conversations. We've been having these conversations, but they've been difficult. I think that we also have to be realistic that while California has done some of the work, when you look at some of the votes, they've been really hard. They've been hard votes on the floor,
Absolutely.
Right, in both houses. And so I think it speaks to the fact that, even with an overall understanding of what the goal would be, the logistics of how we get there, how we make childcare more affordable, how we ensure that women have family leave and parents actually and fathers have family leave, I think is all really, really important. And I think we are behind other countries. And I think we're trying to determine how that happens. And we are having conversations of how you balance all of these elements of paid family leave altogether, childcare costs and issues with workers and productivity. I think it's a fascinating time at this moment to also understand that COVID has changed some of the landscape for what we think. And I think that that's all part of the conversations we're having. And certainly, I believe we will have more conversations in the coming years about this.
So, senators, in contrast to our debates here about balancing work and parenting and the policy challenges that affect parents and their kids and wanting to spend more time with our children, I saw a recent article headlined, "What Becoming a Parent Really Does to Your Happiness." And it warned readers that some scholars say if you want to be happy, it's best to be childless, and that having kids is bad for your quality of life. And I laughed and I thought, oh my gosh, but I discerned that the ultimate theme of the tongue-in-cheek article is that with being a parent, the satisfaction and warm feeling comes in different ways than via, direct happiness. You want to comment on that? Say, Senator Limón, and maybe counter what the sociologists say about equating happiness with with being a parent.
So I chuckle at that because I think you could substitute that with a lot of things, including being an elected official, right? I think the data would probably be very similar, but I think that this is one of the things about, where we're at, and that being a parent is something that a lot of us, not of course all, but a lot of us choose. And I think it's a very different type of a happiness. And I think that we don't all get fulfilled in the same way as others. Do I think that being a parent is difficult? Yeah, but I also think that being an elected official at our level is also difficult. So, and I find happiness in my job as I do in being a parent. I think that each life experience that we have is different for us at different points in life. I don't know that, me taking a survey 10 years ago, contrasting it with where I'm at 10 years later is always an equal measure of our understanding, because life has changed. Assuming life had not changed, I think it might have been interesting. And perhaps now I'm just going too much into trying to debunk this as a former researcher, right? But I do think it's different. And I know that as cliche as this sounds, I wouldn't change where I'm at in life today. I like where I'm at in life today. I love that I have a daughter, but that doesn't mean that there's days that are really hard, days where I'm like, I managed to get through today, and I was just simply not as put together as I used to be, kind of walking into the Capitol and having it all put together, but that's just the way we are. So I think I have a lot of respect for the individuals and couples who go down a path and choose that their path is going to be to just be the two of them. And I have a lot of respect for couples or individuals who choose to be parents and navigate that. And I think that there is room for both. And I think both have a different level of happiness. And certainly, we can get into the weeds of that research survey a little bit more.
Okay. Senator Newman, does happiness equate with being a dad in all giddy ways? What do you have to say about that?
It depends what time of day you ask me, right? So if you asked me last night, I'm not sure, but I think it gets to this kind of interesting question about the subtle distinction between happiness and contentment, or happiness and meaning, and it sneaks up on you, right? So I'm like I said, I'm a pretty old dad. Took us a while to get to this point, and I'm always struck by just how different my life is, but how wonderful it is. And so I this past July 4th, perfect example. You wind up going to a bunch of July 4th ceremonies in your district, and I brought my little kid. And we were in Yorba Linda, and after the speeches, she and I were laying on the infield watching the fireworks. And because of the pandemic, I don't think my little kid had seen fireworks in person ever until July 4th. And she was initially just terrified, right? And I said, hey, put your hands over your ears and lie on your back, and we'll watch. And so she and I were lying there kind of with shoulder to shoulder, with our heads next to each other watching. And when it ended, I didn't really know what she thought. I said, how was it? She said, it was spectacular. And I found myself thinking, like, wow, when did you learn the word spectacular? But as I was driving home, I thought, that was the most awesome dad experience I've ever had, right? And you couldn't possibly replicate that except in that way. And so it's a blessing.
That is such a sweet story. Thank you for sharing that.
As you say this, you can't see me, but the smile that I have on my face listening to you tell that story is just like, I am like, oh, you need to tell that story more often, Ross. It is amazing because I can just visualize it and feel it.
It was awesome, but don't let my daughter fool you. She's not always good.
I love it.
I might know the feeling.
Senator McGuire, what do you think?
Look, I think any parent will say it is the best thing that they have ever faced in their life, and it's probably the toughest challenge they've ever faced in their life as well. I was up. Connor is teething, so his two top teeth are popping right now. So his teeth were hurting in the middle of the night on Sunday night. Got him out of bed, gave him a little bit of Tylenol. He had a dirty diaper. He literally put his hand in his diaper and had poop on his face at 2:30 a.m. in the morning. I say all that is, at that moment, I'm thinking, holy hell. And it's all worth it. Right?
Yes.
It is all worth it. And I think for Erica and I, our perspective is a little different. We have been wanting to be able to have a kid, and we haven't been able to. We've really struggled. So I know I've said this a lot, Brian, in this interview, but when you see struggle in your life, you want to change it. And we never thought that we were going to be able to have a kid naturally. And now that he's here, perspective, we are incredibly grateful. And the first 4 months was a blur. Some of the toughest times that we've had with the adjustment, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. And it is absolutely 110% true. The love that you feel for your kid is different than any other love that you have felt in your life. And I'm really happy to be able to have that love in my heart.
That was beautifully put. I could not have captured the essence of the joy and struggle of parenting as impactfully as the three of you just did. So a final question for you three Senator parents as we wrap. Let's look to your child's future. Do you find as dads and mom projecting your own hopes and dreams for the empowered, hopefully heart-smart-filled human being that you want your children to become? And do you think about how much or little control that you'll have over that dynamic as he or she grows? What do you want for your child's future? Starting with you, Senator McGuire, what do you want for Connor?
What I want him to have greater opportunities than what Erica and I had in our life. But I also want to make sure that he has a life that he doesn't have to worry constantly every summer about wildfires, about the climate, underfunding our public schools. I use some of these as examples of, I think that it is up to us in the legislature to be able to give this next generation a better livelihood than what we had and what our parents had. So that's where I really want to be focused. And what I want for Connor is I want him to be a good guy. I want him to be compassionate and loving. I want him to be respectful. I want him to, whoever he turns out to be happy with himself, because he knows that whatever happens, we are always going to love him. And that's all you can ask for. So I don't want to put too much pressure on the kid at this point. What I want for him is to have a good childhood, a healthy childhood, and a happy home, and that's what I think that we're providing him. And again, I couldn't be more thrilled, man. Being a parent will always be the most stressful experience for most folks in their lives. I would be lying to you to say that we haven't had some stressful moments, and some of the best moments in my 40 years of being on this earth has happened in the last 8 months.
Senator Limón.
Wow, I think I want a lot for my daughter, as well as the whole future. I think I want her to not pay some of the consequences of the decisions and either action or inaction that some of us leaders are kind of moving forward about issues we care about. I want her to be healthy. I want her to be accepted and loved for whatever decisions she makes. And I think I want this for everyone, but certainly I think of, little girls. I really, really hope that the struggles that women have gone through in the decades will not become their struggles, that they will have overcome that, and that when Josh's little girl and my little girl are meeting up for coffee 30 years from now, whatever it is, that they will believe that we were able to get them to a place to have a more equal playing field as young girls, as women. And I think that to me is all important. I really want them to have an environment that we've left to them that isn't always putting them in the middle of natural disasters and really deep climate impacts. I mean, my list can go on and on about what I want for my daughter and for the future.
And finally on that, Senator Newman.
So my little kid, I want her not just to be equal, but to take that for granted, that girls and boys, men and women are truly equal. And we fight this kind of interesting battle with a 5-year-old about, the kinds of things that she gravitates toward or the choices she makes. So I tried really hard to keep her away from the unicorns and the princesses. And that turns out to be harder than I expected. I mean, I bought her like the space model and the engineering games. But and your friends all say, oh, your daughter's so smart. And she's not smart enough to close her eyes in the bathtub when we try to get the shampoo out her eyes. but you want her to be happy and curious and well-adjusted. And so our latest thing is I took her for her first ice hockey lesson, where they had a special day where the Anaheim Ducks were just girls only. It was young women teaching these little girls how to skate, and it was awesome. And then as we left, and she wanted to go buy something in the pro shop, I covered her eyes as she passed the figure skating class because I want her to compete on an even footing with the boys. And if she decides not to do that, she'll be fine. But we should make sure that our kids are equal, and we leave them a world that is hopefully as decent as the one that we received. And so within that, the climate change and the environment have to be one of the first order priorities for the next 20 years.
That's wonderful. And actually, an ice hockey playing princess is not a bad thing to be here in this world. So that's great.
We will see.
Wow. I am both humbled and inspired by everything that you have shared with us. And I'm genuinely grateful to each of you for being so candid and open about your lives and sharing your stories about parenting. And I wish you and your spouses, your partners, all the best for the future. And we will look forward to seeing you at the start of the session in the new year. Senator Monique Limón, Senator Josh Newman, and Senator Mike McGuire, thanks for being with us on Then There's California.
Hey, you guys, thank you so much. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, you guys. Thank you.
Brian, thank you for very thoughtful questions.
Senator Monique Limón of Santa Barbara, Senator Josh Newman of Fullerton, and Senator Mike McGuire of Healdsburg on the North Coast, some of our California State Senator parents. That brings us to a close of this edition of Then There's California. We're a production of the California State Senate Democratic Caucus with technical assistance and production support from Martin Ashley, Bob Brulte, Brian Shadden, McLeana Woods, Lisa Murphy, and the graphic design talents of Tim Davis. From the state capitol in Sacramento, I'm Brian Green, and as always, Thanks for listening to Then There's California.